Objectif, assurer une certaine convergence économique et la stabilité de la zone euro.
Sauf que la maison euro n'a pas toujours été bien gérée. Dès 1997, le pacte de stabilité et de croissance a été imaginé pour éviter les dérives économiques des États.
Oui, tout le monde a déjà entendu parler des fameux critères de Maastricht, des 3% de déficit budgétaire maximum par PIB que les États ne doivent pas dépasser, ou encore des 60% de dette publique. Objectif, assurer une certaine convergence économique et la stabilité de la zone euro. Même avant la crise, en cas de non-respect des règles, des sanctions étaient prévues, mais qui n'ont jamais été appliquées.
Mais la crise grecque, puis la contagion à d'autres pays, a obligé les pays de la zone euro à resserrer le boulot. C'était ça ou la fin de l'euro, disent aujourd'hui les experts. Pour éviter le pire, c'est tout un arsenal qui a été négocié et finalement adopté par les États membres et le Parlement européen. Objectif, consolider la zone euro.
Alors, qu'est-ce qui change concrètement? L'idée, c'est de renforcer la surveillance des budgets des États, avant leur adoption et même après. L'objectif, l'équilibre des budgets. Pour y parvenir, l'Union a inséré dans le pacte de stabilité ce qu'on appelle le semestre européen. La nouveauté, la surveillance ne concerne plus uniquement le déficit d'un pays ou la dette. Désormais, la Commission européenne surveillera aussi d'autres indicateurs macroéconomiques, comme l'endettement public et privé ou l'évolution du chômage.
Oui, Julie, mais pour renforcer davantage la maison commune, les États ont fini par accepter de renforcer les sanctions contre les pays en déficit.
Désormais donc, des amendes quasi automatiques peuvent être appliquées contre des pays qui ne respectent pas le nouveau pacte de stabilité. Et cela pourra leur coûter très cher, 0,5% du PIB si un État triche avec ses comptes publics. Bien sûr, des exceptions ont été prévues. En cas de circonstances exceptionnelles, l'Union pourra donner plus de temps aux États qui ont de grandes difficultés. On parle aussi beaucoup de créer un vrai gouvernement économique de la zone euro, avec un ministre de la zone euro. Mais ça, c'est une autre histoire.
Hei, mun nimi on Saara. Mä olisin kysynyt seuraavaa asiaa. Me kaikki joudutaan maksaa siitä, että meidän yhteisvaluutta euro säästyisi. Ja mä haluaisin tietää, että miten me voidaan varmistaa se, että nämä rahat ei valu Kankkulan kaivoon.
On l'a bien vu avec la crise de la dette grecque, c'est toute la zone euro qui a fini par être ébranlée. Or, la fin de l'euro représente un risque incalculable et pour éviter la faillite, il faut donc stabiliser la zone euro. À côté de la politique monétaire menée par la Banque centrale européenne et après avoir renforcé le pacte de stabilité budgétaire, la solution proposée s'appelle le MES, le mécanisme européen de stabilité. Son rôle, accorder des prêts aux pays en difficulté avec ou sans l'aide du Fonds monétaire international. Mais pas question de renflouer un État sans contrepartie. Pour bénéficier du MES, un État devra d'abord se rapprocher du FMI, tout en respectant l'indépendance de la Banque centrale, et il faudra désormais mettre en œuvre des règles budgétaires beaucoup plus strictes. Mais comment ce MES va-t-il bien pouvoir fonctionner? Le MES représentera les 17 pays membres de la zone euro. À sa tête sera nommé un directeur général. La Commission européenne et la Banque centrale européenne pourront devenir observateurs si elles le souhaitent. Mais chaque membre du MES n'aura pas le même poids. Le premier actionnaire sera l'Allemagne, soit 27% du capital. Deuxième actionnaire, la France, suivi par l'Italie. Malte, le plus petit pays de la zone euro, sera lui le plus petit actionnaire. Après bien des hésitations, le capital du MES a finalement été fixé à 700 milliards d'euros, dont 80 milliards d'euros seront libérés dans un premier temps. Ce sont les États qui financeront directement le MES. Cet argent servira de garantie pour lever d'autres capitaux. Ces capitaux pourront alors être mis à disposition d'un État en difficulté, moyennant intérêt. Mais pas question d'aider un malade qui refuse de se soigner. À la demande expresse de l'Allemagne, toute aide financière sera soumise à une stricte conditionnalité. La zone euro interviendra si le pays en difficulté a demandé de l'aide au FMI et s'il s'engage à réformer son pays. Évidemment, si le pays aidé ne respecte pas ses obligations, il devra payer une amende en plus de sa participation au MES, et naturellement, il ne pourra plus recevoir d'aide. Mais qui contrôlera les activités du mécanisme européen de stabilité? Les eurodéputés l'ont vivement regretté, mais ni le Parlement européen, ni les parlements nationaux n'auront leur mot à dire. Ils seront tenus informés des décisions prises par le MES, mais ne pourront pas s'y opposer. La surveillance du MES sera quand même confiée à des auditeurs internes et externes nommés par le MES. Ces contrôleurs auront tout pouvoir pour examiner les comptes du MES et pour obtenir toute information sur ces opérations. Et en cas de conflit entre les membres du mécanisme de stabilité, c'est la Cour de justice de l'Union qui aura le dernier mot.
The objective is not make more debt in Europe. The objective is to allow our economies to grow, to generate jobs and to generate wealth while we keep debt low in Europe.
Eine gemeinsame Währung zu haben bedeutet zwangsläufig, dass sich alle Mitglieder dieser Währungsunion in Verantwortung für die Stabilität der gemeinsamen Währung stellen.
The objective is not to make more debt in Europe. The objective is to allow our economies to grow, to generate jobs and to generate wealth while we keep debt low in Europe.
Eine gemeinsame Währung zu haben bedeutet zwangsläufig, dass sich alle Mitglieder dieser Währungsunion in Verantwortung für die Stabilität der gemeinsamen Währung stellen müssen. Dazu gehört zunächst und ganz zuallererst eine verantwortungsvolle Haushaltspolitik. Das ist die Idee des Stabilitäts- und Wachstumspakts.
Fiscal rules can easily spill over and can affect economy of all EU. So as the consequence, we should avoid countries getting into fiscal crisis.
La primera, establecer sendas fiscales individualizadas para cada país teniendo en cuenta la situación de sus finanzas. La segunda, prestar más atención al crecimiento. Y la tercera, adherirse al medio plazo mucho más que al corto plazo.
We also must acknowledge, of course, the growing demands on our states, as we've seen in recent years, but also create mobility and opportunities for everyone.
We are now pivoting to a completely different world, and we need to focus collectively on economic resilience and security without abandoning competitiveness perspective.
Und die Investitionen in den Green Deal dürfen auch jetzt von den Mitgliedstaaten nicht als Ausrede für neue Schulden verwendet werden, denn wir haben bereits in vielen Bereichen Mittel dafür bereitgestellt.
This is why we as EPP Group say very clearly, our economies need to grow faster than our debt grows.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm just sort of getting back into the groove of running Zoom like we used to do during the pandemic, but I haven't done anything on Zoom since beginning of May. Well, I've done other internet conferences using other video conferencing software, but I haven't used Zoom since I taught a class when I was at a conference in May, teaching from my hotel room in the US to my classes in the springtime. So I'm getting back to the learning again, reminding myself how this all functions in terms of screen share and recording and everything. So yeah, we're all being recorded, as you can see on and I will post the link to the recording of the class on the Cyber Campus. So again, regarding Cyber Campus, I guess we should also do the Cyber Campus attendance, and of course I have to remind myself always to share. So hopefully you can see the share, and there you see, yes, you know, they've changed Zoom over the months to make it a little more easy to know that things are going correctly. So it flashes a little screen on the screen to show what it is indeed screen sharing. So we're policy making in the European Union, and we go to attendance, and then we go to weeks 5 here, and then your smart attendance number is 309. So you can see 309, and of course I recall also sometimes it's useful have the that placed in the chat. And as I can recall, what is the chat? Okay, so there's the chat, and I put in to the chat, and no, that's not what I want. So I want to, of course, it's updating things. So it's, of course, it's making things kind of complicated. So I want to put in 309, I think was the number. So so let me see. The chat is not really working the way I used to remember it working, which is kind of interesting. Chat 309. So 309. Okay. Yes, there it goes. Okay, 309 is your smart attendance number. So okay, so we have also our debate today, and of course we'll do the whole debate online as well. And so let me go back to the lesson plan I have for today. And so we click on the lesson plan, and there you can see the lesson plan and on the screen share. And so what do we want to cover? Oh, what I do want to make sure we cover, of course, is signing up for your debates. So I've already talked about this in my U.S. history and foreign policy classes. So if you're in those two classes, please, one of those two classes, please forgive me for going over it again, but we have to cover it for everybody. So again, we go to the let me go to Drive and Google Drive here, and again to show you the Google Drive file that I posted, and I sent you all an email, I believe, a link to the sign up sheet for the debate. So everybody should sign up for a debate. And somebody's chatting me. Who's chatting me? I did. Well, okay. Okay, I have to catch that later, Ketsia. Okay, so you can see on the so let me see here, attendance, and well, it looks like okay. So all right, so back to the Google Drive here, and you can see the Google Drive, and the sign-in sheet for the Google Drive is this. So make sure again you can see it, and you go to here, and there is the sign up. You see the debate is 15% of the final course grade, and so nobody's yet signed up for a debate. Oh, Han Bean. All right, Han Bean signed up for the last week of the semester. Signed up for the debate, and I will be if you sign up for a week and you don't have any student sign up to be your opponent, then I will be your opponent. And as Han Bean knows, that's nothing to be afraid of, because it's not the first time, won't be the first time that I have actually lost in the debate in terms of having the students vote anonymously on who won the debate. Sometimes I lose, sometimes I win, but I lose just as much as I win typically on these debate exercises. So everybody should sign up for a debate. And I sent you the link. And if you didn't get it, let me know and I'll send it to you again. But just like I sent you the link to the book file to download the textbook, right? So it's the same Google Drive function. And so you can go ahead and do that. And then let me see here. Let me open up another file and show you the debate evaluation rubric. And so stop share, and then again, share again. So here is the debate evaluation rubric. You can see here, this is the general format. So when we do the debate, affirmative is pro, will speak for 4 minutes. And then, I'm sorry, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 6 minutes, not 4 minutes. And then con speaks or negative for 6 minutes. And then pro rebuts con for up to 4 minutes. And then con follows with a rebuttal conclusion for up to 7 minutes, and then the pro or affirmative concludes and rebuts for 3 minutes. So pro speaks 3 times, con speaks twice, and I will ask the class to evaluate anonymously the debate on in terms of the opening statement, that first 6-minute presentation that each pro and con makes, and then the rebuttal as well. Excellent, ranked at excellent, in terms of excellent, 5 points, good 4 points, satisfactory 3 points, limited 2 points, and not so good 1 point, both for the opening statement and the rebuttal. Also the presentation style. So, we'll typically do this in class. So it won't be done over Zoom. I've done it over Zoom. I can do it over Zoom. We have had debates over Zoom. It's okay to have debates over Zoom because, even though we're done with the pandemic, long done with the pandemic, so much of the working world, the professional world has changed. So, so much people are still continuing to work from home, still working through video conferencing. I'm always frequently participating in video conference events. There was something this morning, for example, a video conference presentation from my home university at the University of Pittsburgh that started at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, 1:30 a.m. my time, and went till about 2:30 a.m. my time. And it was on Zoom. And, so that's happening all the time. So, having debates over Zoom, that's okay. That's good practice because that people make presentations all the time now on video conferencing. Zoom is one platform for video conferencing software, but there are many video conference software platforms out there. I like Zoom. Everybody knows Zoom, but sometimes I go to these. I participate in these internet conferences, virtual conferences, and the conference organizer wants to save money, so they get a bid from somebody offering a video conference virtual platform that must be cheaper, but then it causes some problems because people aren't familiar with it, or it doesn't work well, or whatever. But that's just the way it is. There are many different kinds of video conferencing platforms, but video conferencing is here to stay, right? So there's it's going to get even more elaborate as the software becomes more elaborate, more realistic, and more user friendly. So presentation style is also one of the evaluation criteria for the debate, and also the use of week's reading materials. And of course, if anybody has questions, you can always raise your voice, or you can try to send me a chat message, although I might not see the chat message because I'm sharing a screen. So that's why you might have to raise your hand electronically, or raise your voice if you have a question. Again, just to continue here, the use of week's reading material is also one of the evaluation criteria, because again, like we say before, the purpose of all communication is to persuade. And so you have to know your audience in order to persuade your audience, or try to persuade your audience more effectively. And that means our audience, for us in our classes, academic audience. We're an academic audience. So we expect to have evidence. Like I keep pointing out, you're out in the paragraphs that you submit, right? That you have to use and cite specific academic evidence, because to persuade me as an academic, or to persuade any academics, you have to provide scholarly knowledge as evidence for any claim you make. Otherwise, it's just an opinion, and we don't really care about opinions. We want truth statements, claims of truth that you make, and you try to persuade me those claims of truth are actually accurate by providing evidence, right? By using and citing specific information from the textbook or other scholarly sources in order to support your claims. So that's why I say use of weekly reading material. So if you can show how the authors of the chapter that you're reading for that week, support what you're arguing in pro or con on the debate topic you select, that's great. Okay, and of course, if you want to make PowerPoint presentations or show video clips, that's fine. I can obviously share with you the screen share so that you can share your screen, so you can share your PowerPoint, or you can share your YouTube clip that you want to show, or whatever. That's fine as well. So if you want to use if it's online, of course. If it's in the classroom, then of course you can do that there in the classroom as well, upstairs in K342, you can, bring your presentation on a flash drive, or you can, use the computer like in the classroom in order to access information. Okay. So, and so you can sign up for the debate, and try to organize your schedule. This is the end of the 5th week. So after a couple more weeks in the middle of next month, we'll also have conference sessions for us to discuss the first draft of your midterm paper, which you'll submit a week from tomorrow, and submit that to me so that I can write comments on it and send it back to you, and then we'll meet and talk about my comments in your paper. Okay. And so I will also again send out another Google Drive link so that you can sign up. I'll give you a place to sign up for a space to come to my office at a time. Or if you want to, you can also meet like this on Zoom with me if you don't want to come in during midterm week. I mean, some students feel really, busy or whatever, so they might not want to come into the university, but typically most students still want to come in and talk to me, although there's always a couple students that would prefer to meet with me virtually on Zoom like this right now, which we can do. It's no problem. It's fine. No, either way is fine. So, okay. And also we save paper. We don't waste paper, which is always a good thing when we try to avoid killing trees by using this kind of sign up Google Drive formats. Okay, so let's go back then to, and again, it says stop share. So I have to go back to the, to the lesson plan. And so we go here. And so there you can see the lesson plan again. And what's going on to make things really exciting, try to make things as exciting as possible for you. Of course, every day I read the New York Times, and so what did the New York Times have in the news yesterday that was really important for this class? And we've spent some time in the last couple of weeks talking about the institutions, focusing a little bit more on the institutions of the European Union. And so maybe this is a good point to highlight. Well, let's open up the notes for the European Union policymaking class, chapter 3, institutions. And so if I can go here, and then again, I gotta reshare the screen. So share screen. And I think this is this it? Yeah, I think this is chapter 3. And so there it says, okay, so there's the notes for chapter 3. So let's do a keyword search on ECB, the European Central Bank. And the European Central Bank, right? That's one of the institutions. It's a relatively young institution. It was established in 1998 on the eve of the launch of the final stage of Economic and Monetary Union, EMU, Economic and Monetary Union, and which began in January 1999. And then the paper money, I don't have any euros on me. Maybe some of our European students do have some paper European euros. I don't have any euro money on me. But the paper money started, I think, a year later, after January 1999. The paper money came out, I think, in 2000. And, it's a new institution. And, going back to the theme that we introduced at the beginning of the semester, right? The claim is often made that I highlighted that quote from Jean Monnet, one of the founders of the European Union, or I should say one of the leaders of the foundation, of the European Union, Jean Monnet, that the European Union will evolve and develop in response to crises. So, January 1999 into 2000, the world is experiencing at that time, this is like 24 years ago, I remember, Bill Clinton was still in office and leaving office in the 1990s. George W. Bush became president of the United States in the November 2000 elections, when he inaugurated president in January 2000 January 2001. But the world economic situation has been doing pretty well, right? The longest period of economic expansion in the United States in modern times since the 1840s under Bill Clinton. From the recovery from the early 1990s brief recession, Bill Clinton is president. The economy is growing. The European economies are growing. You have big challenges to the former communist countries like Bulgaria and Poland and Czechoslovakia and Hungary, that they're trying to undertake their tremendously difficult transition from communist, Stalinist economic and political systems to liberal democratic, capitalist economic and democratic, liberal democratic political systems. And that is very, very difficult, but it's not as difficult as it would be if the world was also going into recession. So the world wasn't in recession. Russia was in very deep difficulty in the 1990s. Of course, the Soviet Union collapsed at the end of 1991, going into 1992. Its economy of Russia's economy that would come out of the Soviet Union would be very, very weak. I mean, again, as I told you, I remember reading reports that the Russian economy in the early 1990s was about the same size as the Belgian economy. Tremendous difficulty, financial economic difficulty. But in Western Europe and the United States, the economy is doing quite well. And so the European Central Bank is not really directly challenged until several years later, when this all comes to the global financial crisis beginning in 2007 and then really accelerating in 2008, which would then trigger some major problems in Europe with the threatened collapse of banks in Greece and in Spain and in Portugal and in Ireland and in Cyprus. And this is the first big crisis facing the Eurozone. And so this is the really first big crisis facing the economic and monetary union. It's really the first big crisis facing the European Central Bank. And the European Central Bank is particularly confronted by the Greek financial debt crisis. But before we talk about the Greek financial debt crisis, Greek sovereign debt crisis, just to cover the notes that are in the book, in the file I posted for everybody, right? So what is the European Central Bank's function? It formulates the European Union's monetary policy. So it's supposed to maintain monetary stability, which means it's supposed to keep inflation under a certain level, typically not zero inflation, but maintain an inflation rate of about 2%, because zero inflation is not good. It's supposedly, economists have this consensus view that a little bit of inflation every year is desirable in order to maintain some flexibility and some lubrication to the functioning of the development of the economy by having a little bit of inflation. So you don't want zero inflation. You certainly don't want deflation, where the economic prices of goods and services are declining year after year, because then it's very difficult to restart your economy in a growth path on a macroeconomic level if you have deflation. So deflation is bad. It's very bad. So to make sure you don't have deflation, you want to maintain some low level of economic inflation every year. The target typically among economists is 2%. That's what economists say you want. Of course, the claim is that Japan came close to deflation, that Japan went into the deflationary cycle in the early 1990s with the bursting of the real estate bubble in Japan, in Tokyo in particular. And Japan had great difficulty pulling itself out of deflation, despite all the efforts of the Japanese central bank to deal with that problem. So you don't want deflation, but you also don't want too much inflation. So that is what monetary stability typically means, right? It means making sure that inflation doesn't get out of hand, and also to bring in the national element components of this concern. This is a big concern, always cited in the mainstream media in the United States and elsewhere, that the Germans are particularly phobic, have a high phobia about inflation, right? And again, the anchor stone of economic and monetary union is German economic stability and security. That German monetary policy is one of the cornerstones, maybe the anchor of economic and monetary union. And the Germans have a phobia about high inflation. And the claim is typically made in the mainstream media that they have this phobia regarding high inflation because of the 1920s hyperinflation that destroyed the German currency, the German money at the time, in the sense that there was such high inflation that basically everybody's money that they had saved, you know, to take care of themselves, to prepare for, you know, when they could no longer work because they're old, that all of their savings just basically disappeared. And that was one of the great economic shocks that happened and experienced into Germany after the First World War, along with the other difficulties and humiliations confronting the Germans after their defeat in the First World War, that the great inflation in the 1920s is something they're terribly afraid of, and of course would then be one of the factors that would contribute to the rise of National Socialism in Germany when the Great Depression then came in 1929. So to maintain that monetary stability, the European Central Bank sets interest rates, and it ensures and manages the euro. There's a governing council of the European Central Bank, which consists of the chairperson of each of the national banks of each of the Eurozone member states. So I believe there's only 20 Eurozone members, I believe. I think Croatia joined this year on January 1 to the Eurozone. And again, you know, Croatia, they love the Eurozone, partly because they don't have any problem with German influence. They view themselves as allies of the Germans. And again, we talked briefly about that last week. So each of the chairpeople of the chairpersons of each of the national banks of the member countries in the Eurozone constitutes the European Governing Council, European Central Bank Governing Council, I should say. And then there's a chairman of that European Central Bank, and that today is Christine Lagarde, right, who had previously been the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. And the Eurozone member states choose the president, Christine Lagarde, and then an executive council to direct it. And it sits not coincidentally in Frankfurt, Germany, right across the street from what had been the headquarters of the German Central Bank. So it's not a coincidence that the European Central Bank is also in Frankfurt, right across the street from the German Central Bank headquarters. So criticisms still emerge regarding the European Central Bank's transparency and accountability. And these emerge because of the European Central Bank's really strong focus on inflation control, right? No more than 2% inflation. The European Central Bank will be willing to raise interest rates and raise the cost of loans to banks and to other businesses in the Eurozone, if necessary, in order to slow down the economy to reduce inflation. And of course, when you slow down the economy to reduce price inflation, pressures to raise prices, in other words, when you slow down the economy to stop people from buying too much, that's because there's too little available, when that happens, the prices go up. And if it starts going up higher than 2% a year, the European Central Bank will raise interest rates to make it more costly to buy and sell things. And so people don't buy and sell as much. Businesses don't buy and sell as much because it's too costly to buy and sell, because the prices of loans from banks are too high. And that affects everybody, including you and me who have credit cards, right? Our debt on our that we pay as interest on our credit card debt, it reflects, for example, the European Central Bank interest rate that it's charging for loans to the banks that then turn provide loans to us, okay? Because that's what happens. European Central Bank or the American Federal Reserve or the South Korean Central Bank makes loan to banks, and those banks then use that money to make loans to other businesses and other banks too. So the reason why this issue of transparency and accountability comes up is because the European Central Bank is willing to raise the level of unemployment if necessary, because the most important concern is making sure that inflation stays at 2%, that it doesn't go below that and it doesn't go above that. And if it goes above it, they will raise interest rates. And of course, one of the consequences has been, at least until this post pandemic environment that we are facing, which is very strange new situation, I should say, right? That whenever you raise interest rates, it's going to slow down the economy, and that means there's going to be a higher unemployment rate. And if higher unemployment means more difficult for people to find, some people to find jobs, and with all the stresses and strains that go on people when they lose their job or they can't find a job, I mean, that's really stressful. I mean, you know, you're young people, but you know, somebody referenced to me that, you know, surveys have been done and have found that, you know, losing your job is one of the most stressful things that a human being goes through in their lives in a developed country, right? You know, it's up there with getting divorced and a death in the family, right? So unemployment is a social justice issue. And so the European Central Bank and also the American US Federal Reserve Bank, they've been criticized because they're not accountable enough. They don't take, supposedly, some critics claim, enough into consideration the social pain of unemployment. And that's what the European Central Bank and the US Federal Reserve and other central banks of other countries respond. They say, well, we can only take care of monetary policy. Nothing is stopping the government of the United States or the government of the member states of the European Union or the European Union central authorities themselves, the European Parliament and the Commission, from using fiscal policy to address the economy and to regulate the economy. And so, you know, the European Central Bank or the US Federal Reserve, they deal with monetary policy and they do what they can do to limit unemployment, but there's limits to what they can do. They can be very creative. And we saw that during the pandemic, that the US Federal Reserve was incredibly creative in using what tools it had and creating new monetary policy tools to support institutions, supporting businesses to try to keep them from going bankrupt during the pandemic when there was national economic shutdowns to stop the spread of the coronavirus or to slow the spread of the coronavirus. So, you know, I mean, it's I know you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. So you're not that old, but you're still, you might, I guess you might remember the fear and anxiety that came to the entire world about what was going to happen with the coronavirus and how do you stop this virus and what happens when you shut down an economy and how many businesses are going to go bankrupt. I mean, I saw amazing, you know, frightening predictions that like 35 or a third of all small and medium-sized businesses in the United States were going to close because they were not going to survive. If there was a shutdown of the economy to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And I mean, we saw incredible scrambling both by the banks and also by the fiscal policy of the central governments to deal with that challenge. And they've done a pretty decent job. The central governments and the central banks have done a pretty decent job of dealing with that pandemic crisis, which we're still recovering from, right? But again, that's the key point. The central bank, the European Central Bank and the national central banks are only responsible for monetary policy. Fiscal policy is determined by the legislatures and the executive branch of Germany, of Belgium, of France, of South Korea, of the United States, and also the emerging fiscal policy of the European Union, which has expanded greatly, partly in response to the pandemic with the Next Generation European Union program, which again, you know, that was a direct response to the pandemic, and that has really developed further the fiscal policy of the European Union central authorities. So this, you know, 800 billion or so euro, 850 billion euro program that is still being developed through selling bonds on the financial markets to give money to Greece, Poland, Italy, France, Germany, not United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom left the European Union, to respond to the pandemic and also to other issues, like, for example, the European Union requires that next generation money be used for green transition, and promoting digital technology development. So, so again, it's a young institution. European Central Bank is a young institution, but it has become a very powerful institution. And in 2014, before the pandemic, obviously, after the immediate shock of the Greek financial crisis, the European Union expanded the powers of the European Central Bank to include supervision of particular national banks in Italy or Greece or in France. So the European Union, the European Central Bank is responsible for doing stress tests and evaluating the survivability of particular banks in Italy or Greece or Germany. And yet, again, so much of this is, borrowing best practice and historical precedent from other examples. And of course, the big example is the United States, right? So the United States Federal Reserve Bank, they've always been involved in supervising banks. So when a bank in the United States is in danger of going bankrupt, the United States Federal Reserve Bank, that's the name we give to the American Central Bank, they will intervene and they will restructure that bank and they will sell off parts of the bank, of that bankrupt bank or endangered bank, to other banks. So they do that all the time, and they're doing it now, right? There's the Silicon Valley Bank in California that went bankrupt. It was in danger of going bankrupt earlier this year. And the European, I think the Federal Reserve had one of the big banks in the United States. They organized one of the big banks coming to take it over. And it might be JP Morgan or one of the big famous banks. They organized and orchestrated that big bank coming in and taking over Silicon Valley Bank. That's one bank. There was another bank that went bankrupt. So the European Union, the point is that as they look for, how do you do this kind of stuff? They look to the United States example, right? So in 2014, 9 years ago, the European Union said, hey, yeah, let's have the European Central Bank be responsible for supervising individual banks throughout the Eurozone. And again, that sounds cool and everything, but again, you got to be very careful because of economic nationalism. Of course, there are going to be people suspicious. Oh, is the European Central Bank being unfair to this Italian bank? Are they being more strict against Italian banks because the European Central Bank is supposedly too biased in favor of Germany and German thinking and German practices? So are they going to, and who's going to take over that bankrupt Italian bank? Is it going to be another Italian bank, or should it be, it's supposed to be a single market, right? A single market. So if an Italian bank goes bankrupt, maybe we should let a French bank come in and take it over. The way JP Morgan came and took over Silicon Valley, we'll have a French bank come over and take over that Italian bank. Oh, no. We don't want, they're going to be this nationalist response. And the European Central Bank has been trying to move in that direction, towards, okay, we're going to allow mergers and acquisitions by, Dutch banks taking over a Scandinavian, a Swedish bank, let us say, or a bankrupt or a financially weak, precarious Italian bank can be taken over by maybe a German bank. And they keep moving that direction, but then they're very cautious and very hostile. And I think they stopped, right? There's always been talk about when is the European Central Bank going to allow cross-border mergers and acquisitions between banks. And it's a very sensitive, politically sensitive topic because of nationalism. Not because the European Central Bank is nationalistic but because there'll be a public opinion reaction. A Eurosceptic reaction, right? There are always those Eurosceptic populist nationalists in Italy or Greece or Germany that will raise much public alarm over, oh my God, we're allowing a French bank to take over an old prestigious Italian bank, and then the French, they don't care about the well-being of those Italians that are clients of that Italian bank. They're going to be mostly concerned about the well-being of their French stockholders and French interests, and they're going to be making decisions in Paris or wherever they are in France at the expense of people living in Italy. And oh my God, it'd be so. I mean, that was always the concern. So the European Central Bank wants to move in that direction, but I mean, I read the press every day. You know me, I read the newspaper, and I There was talk about that before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened and that all stopped. I haven't seen any discussion about cross-border mergers and acquisition in the New York Times business section about, you know, a French bank taking over a bankrupt or precarious Italian bank. Banks do take over other banks, but still a German bank will take over another bankrupt German bank, or an Italian bank will take over another bankrupt or possibly bankrupt Italian bank. But they haven't approved, as far as I've not seen any approval yet of cross-national bank mergers and acquisitions. I know they want to do it because they've been talking about doing it, but then there's these crises that emerge, right? There's well, we got to deal with the Greek financial crisis first, and then oh my gosh, Russia's intervened in Ukraine in 2014. We have to put sanctions on Russia. So we've got it, and we got problems of course, still dealing with the big problem with Greece, and we got other problems with other banks, and we have problems. And then of course the pandemic happened, but I have not seen any and that would be a big step. That would be the next big step in economic and monetary union. When you start seeing the European Central Bank saying, "Oh, there's a bank in I don't know, in France or Italy that doesn't meet the stress test. We think it's in danger if there's another global financial crisis that they're going to go bankrupt. So we want somebody to take this bank over." And they have not yet agreed or moved to have foreign banks take over a bankrupt bank in another country. All right. And again, I know they want to, but they haven't done it because it's too sensitive, politically too sensitive. So that's something to look for, right? That would be really a major step in creating a genuine single market when banks become truly transnational within the European Union. I mean, there was an Italian bank, an ancient Italian bank. I think they were in danger of going bankrupt. I can't remember what it's called, Pavia. I mean, it's old. Banco di Siena. It's like 500-year-old bank. It goes back to the Renaissance. And I think they had and the European Central Bank was involved in dealing with that bank along with the Italian authorities, and another Italian bank took it over. That's the most recent case that I saw, and that's before the pandemic. Now these other, with the pandemic and the big, oh my God, what are we going to do? And the monetary policies of the banks and the fiscal policies of the central governments moved in to stabilize businesses and banks with lots of subsidies. So things may have been frozen, like so many things were frozen with the pandemic, like the economic cost to Britain from the pandemic. It wasn't clear what the economic costs of Brexit were because of the pandemic, I'm sorry, what were the economic costs to Britain of Brexit were not clear because the pandemic happened and there was this emergency intervention with big monetary policy interventions and subsidies and fiscal policy subsidization of businesses. Oh my God. So we didn't see what the economic costs of Brexit were until now, right? So now we're starting to see it. So but I know it's on the agenda of the European Central Bank. And it would be a big step to have like a Belgian bank be taken over by a French bank, for example, because it's not financially healthy. So watch for that. Watch for that. Yeah, the principal mandate for the European Central Bank is price stability, not maintaining low unemployment. It's maintaining price stability. Of course, unemployment is very important, but the primary mandate is making sure that there's not deflation and that inflation is close to, but not over 2% in the medium term. And it's not so easy. Before the pandemic, there was a lot of concerns about deflation coming to to the European Union, that the economy was not growing fast and not fast enough, and inflation was getting to be to the point of like close to zero. And oh my God, when they go into deflation, they're gonna be like Japan. Oh my God, you know. And then of course that all that concern sort of disappeared with the pandemic and this massive injection of fiscal and monetary stimulus and subsidies into the economy. And so now we have lots of inflation, right? So the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve and the Korean Central Bank and the Japanese Central Bank, they're trying to deal with too much inflation, and they're trying to get the inflation down to 2%, and they're making progress, but it's still not at 2%. I think the inflation rate in the US is 3%. I don't know what it is in Europe, but it's not 2%. It's higher than 2%, but they want to get it to 2%. And they're making progress. So, and the secondary mandate is achieving full employment. But it should not stand in the way of achieving the principal mandate of price stability. Again, we already mentioned the bank's independence and power have raised questions about transparency and accountability. That's on purpose, right? I mean, again, the model is the United States Federal Reserve. That's the model. The United States Federal Reserve Bank was created before the First World War, and it was purposely set up to be autonomous so it would not be under too much direct public opinion pressure in maintaining monetary policy. So it's on purpose to be kind of hidden and private in its decisions, because they're not supposed to. Everybody wants more money, right? Everybody wants more money. The central bank of a government of a country is not to just give everybody the money when they want money, because they have to make sure that they keep inflation down. So that means they're kind of hesitant about being transparent and open in their deliberations when these executive councils or the governors of the Federal Reserve or the Federal Reserve Bank meet. They are being more transparent because business people want to know, and the international financial community and business people all over the world want to know, what is the long-term plans for for monetary policy, so they can make their own business plans and their own investment plans. So, but you saw it. I mean, I showed you in class once when Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, is speaking at a press conference, and you can see she's reading something from a teleprompter, a screen. Every word she is planned that she is to say in that statement about what the European Central Bank has decided and what it will do, because they all know, she knows, and everybody in the European Central Bank Executive Council knows that all of the international global business community is watching them like they watch the American Federal Reserve. Any statement they make is planned to the letter, and they want to know what was decided at the meeting of the central bank directors of the central bank, so that they can make plans about what they think the interest rates will be 6 months or a year from now, and what the inflation rate will be 6 months or a year or 2 years from now. And so everybody can make plans, because what people don't like is unpredictability. The business community in particular, they don't like surprises. If you want to make business plans, you want to be secure about what's going to happen in the future, to the extent that you can be certain about what's going to happen in the future. Right? So that's why, the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve, they've not been very open in public, but they're becoming more open in public. They don't have video cameras recording live their meetings, but they issue transcripts of the meetings. Right? So bankers and business people around the world can read what were the deliberations and what is the analysis that's the basis of the forecasts. Still, we're all about democracy here and accountability. So the European Central Bank must report to the European Parliament several times a year. The European Central Bank must also report to the Council. European Central Bank deliberations until recently were not made public. And a major critique of the European Economic and Monetary Union was that it was so-called asymmetric. That is, across a diverse set of countries, the European Union has supranationalized its monetary policy. Okay, yeah, I mean, you know, they've got more problems with unemployment in, say, Spain than they do in Germany. But when you have one European Economic and Monetary Union and one European Central Bank, you can't use Spanish monetary policy to try to lower Spanish unemployment because Spain doesn't control European monetary policy. So, you know, and so that puts more pressure on the Spanish central government and also on the European Union authorities to do other things to deal with Spanish unemployment. But you can no longer rely upon monetary policy to be as strong a tool in addressing unemployment problems, particularly in countries like Spain or Greece or Southern European countries, you know, that have more problems with unemployment. Yet each of these diverse national governments still are responsible for fiscal policy. Again, the Next Generation European Union Next Generation program is a big major step in the development of a centralized European fiscal policy. It's a major step. It's supposed to be one time, you know, and it will take a few years to go through. But, you know, I know from studying organizations that if an organization is created and set up and useful and it's been effective, it's really hard to abolish it because, hey, it's a nice tool. It works. So we use it for next generation. Why don't we use it, say, to build up a European military, for example, possibly as a future possibility. So, you know, just to show you something else in my little my bag of tricks here. Let me just show you here. So this is from last year. And I got to stop share and I got to do screen share again so you can see it. So we go here and you go here and we make this bigger and you can see here. This is from 2021. So this is like 3 months after the pandemic is declared in March of 2020. Oh, no, sorry, it's a year and 3 months. So it's in June 2021. So Europe moves into the big league Next Generation European Union. So what do I mean about setting up this organization? So it says here, little more than a year ago, the European Union was nothing more than a bit part player in the, it's kind of slow, in the global capital markets. I'll just do it by hand here. The 2 or 3 bond deals that it would typically bring to market in a normal year were often small and would pass by with scant attention from the markets. It took its first step into the big league with the launch of the 90 billion euro SURE program in October of 2020. But this week, the European Union will change gear entirely with the launch of Next Generation European Union, which will see the EU raise more than 800 billion euros over 5 years, transforming it into one of the world's biggest bond issuers. Everything changed last April in 2020, so a month or two after the pandemic is declared, at a summit. That's a European Council meeting, right? A summit meeting is that meeting of the top level government officials. So the official name for that is European Council, to put together a pandemic stimulus plan. When the people in the funding team were asked how far they might expand the program, they thought that at a push, they might raise a maximum of 80 billion euros a year in the markets. But when the summit ended, they were told they would need to raise double that. We were crossing the Rubicon. I mean, that's reference to, you know, Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon to take over Rome. I know it's a big step, said one official. We're really doing what we were doing previously was very plain vanilla stuff, and suddenly it was a very different ball game. It was just a question of throwing overboard everything we've done before and starting to say, okay, if we're going to do this, this is completely different. How do we do it? How do we build a machine that's going to do it? The team spent the first few months figuring out what resource it would need and bringing the right people in to build new, bigger funding body. It seconded individuals. In other words, it said it seconded individuals. Seconded means it people who work for the European Stability Mechanism, which was created to set up a system to deal with problems like Greece in the future, which finances Eurozone crisis era loans to Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Cyprus, and Spain, who had big experience of big bond programs. So just to show you the European Stability Mechanism, because it's referenced in that video that I showed you at the beginning of class. So we type in European Stability Mechanism. I know I have to share the screen again here. European Stability Mechanism. So stop share and then reshare again here. So we go here. There is the Wikipedia page for the European Stability Mechanism. Hooray! So this is it's like a European International Monetary Fund, just for the European Union. And it was created, just a few years after or a couple years after the debt crisis with Greece escalated, to institutionalize how we're supposed to do this in terms of giving money or loaning money to the Greeks and the other countries. So this was set up, again, in response to a crisis, particularly the Greek debt crisis, not only the Greek, but it was primarily dealing with Greece. And then this becomes the foundation for setting up the Next Generation program and the mechanisms for supplying the Next Generation program. So it says here, back to this article, if I can find it. Yeah, there it is, right? So, given that the team was essentially building a debt management office within the European Commission, which borrows on behalf of the European Union. In other words, the European Commission is going to international financial investors around the world and say, hey, any of you want to buy Eurobonds? So the European Commission is overseeing this debt management office. The European Commission is the one that is auctioning off for sale Eurobonds to borrow money from these investors to fund the Next Generation European Union program. So they set up a debt management office. It's in the European Commission. It's there. I would bet you it's not going to end. It's not going to disappear. It's there forever. Because that's the way organizations are. It was natural for it to turn to the national debt management offices. It has been a delicate balancing act of seeking help, including hiring staff from member states without upsetting them by poaching too many people. Member states, after all, also have much higher borrowing needs as a result of the pandemic. So it goes on here. We're kind of a giant new kid in class, stomping around the playground in clogs, said the official. We have to be mindful of that and work with the debt management offices of the member states and communicate with them. We are very careful to do that. They, on the other hand, have understood that we are funding our member state economies and public administration. That's what, and they want us to succeed. The team has had something of a dress rehearsal for Next Generation European Union with the SURE, support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency program. Since the first SURE deal in October of 2020, the funding team has raised 90 billion euros through 7 transactions, allowing it to test its processes, create a liquid secondary curve, and establish itself as a large and frequent issuer of bonds for sale by investors. But Next Generation European Union will be markedly different, not least because its issuance volumes will almost double. All of the SURE transactions have been syndicated by banks, and strict conditions were placed on maturities and size. And while syndication will remain an important component in funding, with one deal every month planned, the team has put together an auction platform that should be set up and running from September of 2021. Indeed, the creation of an auction facility has been the single biggest piece of work for the team. So you auction off the bonds, right, to investors. So you say, anybody want to buy a 100 euro bond for 1% interest over 10 years? No. How about 1.2% interest over 10 years? Anybody want to buy? No. Okay. What about 1.5% interest over 10 years? I'll buy it. Okay. An auction, right? An auction. While auctions are a cheaper way to sell debt than bank syndication, they require more setup work. To save time and avoid lengthy private and procurement processes, the team has instead sought help from public sector institutions such as the European Central Bank. So there you can see, so this is supposed to fund the European Union's post-pandemic recovery and resilience facility. Of that fund, around 55% of that will take the forms of loans to be paid back by member states. So, The rest, as well as another 80 billion via other programs, will be grants to be paid back by the Commission through budget increases and new carbon and digital taxes. That's interesting. So you see, the Commission is also getting more and more powers to tax, because fiscal policy includes revenue, income, and expenditure, what you spend and what you raise in the form of taxes. So the Commission, and that means the European central institutions, are getting more fiscal power, including new taxation power through carbon and digital taxes. So it's looking more and more like a central fiscal government, like a United States of Europe, but for the 21st century, right? Not the 18th century, like when the United States central government was established with the Constitution being signed in 1783 or 1787, sorry, 21st century form. That's interesting. That's interesting. Of course, all this is before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the full-scale invasion, which is another gloomy, nasty, bad situation for Ukraine, but also Europe. But it will be another crisis which the European Union will respond to, is responding to, building upon what it did in the past to deal with other crises. The way, like, for example, the European Next Generation program built upon the European Stability Mechanism. So you can bet, in responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that they're going to build upon this Next Generation program and resources and capabilities to respond to, I don't know, building a European military capability. So it says here, once the auction is set up and running in September of 2021, the team will, on top of managing monthly issue, turn to the final pieces need to make the Commission a fully operational debt management office. Swaps facilities could be added to allow it to fix the rate at which it lends on money to member states. Future contracts may also follow to help liquidity. For now, there seems to be no shortage of demands for bonds. The first sure deal attracted more than $233 billion of orders for the 17 billion bonds on sale. Central banks, including the European Central Bank, continue to hoover up bonds to support the economy. And indeed, about a fifth of sure bonds went to such institutions, but fund managers and banks were even bigger buyers. So it was already, from its start, it was a safe, secure investment in the collective eyes of the global financial community. Why? Because they believed that the Germans and the other member states would make this work. And they demonstrated they would make this work in dealing with the Greeks. All right? So this is, all right, so what do I mean dealing with the Greeks and European Central Bank and dealing with the Greeks? I told you about Mario Draghi's big bazooka in a previous class. So here's a news report covering the big bazooka reference. So let me see, I'll open this up here. And again, I got to do the screen share. So stop share and then do the screen share. And we go here and you can see Euro crisis. This is from 14 years ago, right? Has the European Central Bank created a big bazooka? So there you see Mario Draghi, the central, he was the previous president of the European Central Bank before Christine Lagarde. He is now involved in Italian politics. And the word is that, well, he had been prime minister of Italy until this most recent election, but he wants to become president of Italy in the future. So look for him to become president of Italy. And the fact that he was president of the European Central Bank, from an Italian nationalist point of view, this makes their heart beat faster. Oh, yes, Italy, the country that we're kind of ashamed of because it's so inefficient and ineffective compared to those powerful Germans. Oh, an Italian played such an important role. And he used that charisma to go back to Italy and become a player in Italian politics, partly because some other Italian politicians thought we better make him prime minister of Italy because we need him to oversee this money that Italy will be getting through the Next Generation program. Otherwise, the Italians are more likely to waste it or waste a lot of it because Italian politics and political institutions, state institutions are not very, have not been very reliable, shall we say. So that was the claim that why he should be prime minister of Italy, because he will make sure that this next generation money coming to Italy will be used effectively, because the Italian economy is perpetually weaker than the other big economies in Europe. He is no longer prime minister, but he wants to become president of Italy. And of course, the fact he played this powerful role, I mean, that's an important role, a function, and you see in these Southern European countries that are kind of embarrassed by their states because of their inefficient and ineffective histories going back many decades, right? You know, I mean, both in economic policy and in military performance, say in the Second World War or the First World War, or, you know, the instability of their governments in Greece. I mean, Greece had a military dictatorship until 1974. From 1967 to 1974, there was a military coup in Greece, right? So a lot of these some of these Greek economists that play an important role in the European or International Monetary Fund, for example, or Italians or others that play important roles in these international institutions, including the European Central Bank, that have a reputation for being so modern and effective, they get a lot of prestige from that. And then they go back to Rome, or then they go back to Athens and become political players back in Rome and back in Athens, because they have a big reputation. So this is when Mario Draghi said that Greece is not going to default on its debt because the European Central Bank will buy Greek bonds if necessary. The Greek government will never face a situation where, when it does an auction of Greek bonds, nobody buys the bonds because they say, huh, we're not going to buy that bond because you're going to default on it and not pay it back like you promised. You know, even unless you promise us, you give us like 10% profit, that you're going to give us 10% over 10 years of investment. The rule of thumb that I read a few years ago is 6%, right? If you have to offer more than 6% in an auction of your national government bonds to international investors to be willing to buy a 10-year bond or whatever, if you have to go higher than 6%, you got a crisis. So the US has to offer 1 or 2%, right? Italy, I think, has to offer 3 or 4%. But if you got to go to 6%, you got a problem. So he said the Greeks will never have to offer more than, you know, a few percent on their bonds, because we will step in with my big bazooka and we will print euros. We will buy them. The European Central Bank will just print money and give it to the Greeks, euros to the Greeks, for their bonds to cover their national budget deficit, of their government fiscal budget deficit. That was the big bazooka. And that is one of the reasons why Euro bonds are considered a safe, secure, low interest investment, because it's safe and secure, because they've demonstrated since the year 2000 that the European Economic and Monetary Union is for real. It is stable, it is secure. They've already demonstrated, the European Central Bank, the Germans, and of course, the United States through the International Monetary Fund, have demonstrated that they will make this work, that no country will default on its debt in the Eurozone. So you see how this works? Credibility, reputation, through action. But again, it's because of national governments, and also, let's not forget the role of the United States, which basically dominates the International Monetary Fund. So, yeah, so that's the big bazooka that you come across. Still, people talk about the big bazooka. because that was the first time the European Central Bank had ever done that. Right? That we will step in and do whatever it takes to make sure that Greece does not default. In other words, we will just print money to buy Greek bonds, so the Greeks will never default on their debt. So don't worry about that. And so that's all exciting, and we're running out of time here because I always plan too much. Why am I telling you this? Because we're here to celebrate success. Yesterday in the New York Times, I read in the New York Times this report. So let me again show it to you here. Hopefully I can show it to you. What did I do with that? Okay. Greece. So let me see, make sure you can see this and share what's going on with Greece today. And let me show you what's going on with Greece today. So here's Greece today. New York Times reports that, ta-da! Greece, better than a decade ago, is booming. Hooray! Right, this is after the pandemic. Greece is today one of Europe's fastest growing economies. And while investors and tourists are flocking to the country, memories of austerity measures are still fresh for Greeks, because when they gave this 350 billion euros in loans to Greece and set up the European Stability Mechanism to oversee that, in order for the loan to get the loans, the Greeks had to agree to make lots of changes in their government policies. They had to privatize lots of institutions, including public infrastructure like airports. They had to raise the retirement age. Lots of painful, politically difficult, painful things. Again, that Greeks had planned for, right? For whatever reason, you're just a Greek worker. Well, for whatever reason, but it's always been known that in Greece, you can retire when you're 55. So you start working, let's say in 1970, you start working, and then you're looking forward, you're going to retire in 1995 or whatever, let's say 1980, and you're going to retire and, when you're 50 in 2015, you're going to retire. And then, oh my God, this has to change. I made all these plans, all these investments, and all these savings on the assumption I was going to retire in 55. But now the Greek government is telling me I have to work until I'm 65. Oh, it's not fair. It's not fair. Why is it not fair? You can't do that. We made plans. And I'm just trying to explain how this is politically very difficult. But they have carried out changes. It's called conditionality. What are the conditions for it? We'll give you the money on certain conditions. Conditionality is the term. Conditionality. So what does it say here? Laden with debt that it couldn't pay back. It was Greek for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, the Greek government was not honest in how big its budget deficit was. It desperately wanted to be in the Eurozone. So it claimed it met economic and monetary union criteria. It lied collectively. It lied because it desperately wanted to be in the Eurozone. That way we know we're Europeans, right? And of course, then of course, when international investors said, hey, your budget deficit is a lot higher than you said it was, you lied. Oh my God, we're not going to invest in Greece anymore. Oh my God. That was the sovereign debt crisis that was triggered with the Lehman Brothers Bank going bankrupt and other banks going bankrupt in the United States around the world back in 2008. So that's what caused us this cascade event, right? Laden with debt it couldn't pay back, Greece nearly broke the Eurozone a decade ago. Today it is one of Europe's fastest growing economies. In a significant acknowledgement of the country's turnaround, credit ratings agencies have been upgrading their appraisal of Greece's debt and opening the door for large foreign investors. The economy is growing at twice the Eurozone average, and unemployment, while still high at 11%, is the lowest in over a decade. Tourists have returned in droves, fueling a construction frenzy in new jobs. Multinational companies like Microsoft and Pfizer are investing, and banks that almost collapsed have cleaned up and are lending again, benefiting the broader economy. So I'm not going to go through the whole article here. Greece still faces risks. It maintains its mountain of debt has shrunk, but it's still the total debt that the Greek government owes to other investors through bonds that the Greek government has sold to international investors, sovereign debt bonds to cover its budget deficit, it still totals at 166% of gross domestic product of Greece. It's still at 166%, but it was higher, much higher in the past. I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been 250% at one point. I have to go back and check. I can't remember, right? I mean, the American total national government budget debt is 100% of gross national product of the United States, gross domestic product of the United States. So it's 100% in the US. I don't know what it is in Germany. It's got to probably be around 60%. I'd have to check. You can check on, Wikipedia right away, but it's, it's coming down. It's supposed to be at 60%, not 166%, 60%. That's the Stability and Growth Pact criteria for that you make the Maastricht criteria in the Stability and Growth Pact that you're supposed to be at your annual government budget fiscal deficit is not supposed to be more than 3% of gross domestic product of your economy in size. And the total accumulated debt's not supposed to be more than 60% of gross domestic product. And the only country that might come close to that is maybe Germany. You can check to find out what it is in Italy and elsewhere. But the European Central Bank and the Euro economic authorities in the European Union say, well, we look at trends, we look at directions, right? So it's coming down. And, we just want to make sure that the global investors are happy. So evidently, global investors are happy with Greece. So it's mountain of debt, but at 166% of the economy, it's among the world's highest. The country's banks still hold a pile of non-performing loans that is bigger than the European average. So there's a lot of companies that are bankrupt and not going to pay back their loans. The term that is used to describe banks that won't declare a loan as in default, like they loaned some money to somebody and that somebody can't pay them back. It's up to that bank to say, you are in default. And if you say that as a bank, then you have to write down on your annual business report that you lost that loan. So these banks are hesitant to declare a loan as non-performing, as in default, because then they have to officially acknowledge that they have lost money. So these are called zombie banks, banks that are really dead, but not officially, because they won't openly declare those loans as in default. So they're just non-performing. They're not getting back the money that they loaned out, but they haven't declared those borrowers as in default, because they don't want to officially declare that they lost that investment, because then they might be bankrupt. So this is why you need the central bank to come in and oversee this process. So the country's banks still hold a pile of non-performing loans that's bigger than the European average, and the misery of austerity is still fresh for some people, made worse by stubbornly high inflation stoked by Russia's war in Ukraine. Greece became the center of Europe's debt crisis after Wall Street imploded in 2008, with Lehman Brothers Bank going bankrupt in summer 2008. Ireland, Portugal, and Cyprus were also forced to take international bailouts, but Greece had it the worst, requiring 3 rescue packages from 2010 to 2015, totaling 320 billion euros or $343 billion, with bitter austerity terms, conditionalities, right? Hundreds of household incomes and pensions were slashed. The economy shrank by a quarter. I mean, by 25%. The economy, that's like Great Depression times. And hundreds of thousands of business collapses, banks shuttered. By 2013, nearly a third of Greeks were unemployed. That's like the Great Depression. 33% of Greeks are unemployed, officially at least. Greece exited the bailout program's strict fiscal controls in 2018, and the government's actions since then have earned confidence from the European Union. In 2021, Brussels policymakers approved another 30 billion euros for climate investments in Greece, part of a broader effort to bolster EU economies after COVID-19 lockdowns. That's next generation European Union. That's next generation. That's the money for Greece. Remember, there's only 10 million people live in Greece. So $30 billion is a lot of money for 10 million people. And that's one tranche. I don't know how much in total. So, yay! The first big crisis of the Eurozone so far has been met and resolved, more or less. So there you can see. So there you go. Okay, so I thought we'd have time for an exercise in this. So let me ask you to vote. Since I already set this up and it doesn't take any time here, so please respond to the following statement. The success of the Troika in responding to the European sovereign debt crisis. The Troika is the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and let's not forget the International Monetary Fund. That means the United States. In responding to the European sovereign debt crisis shows that constructivists are right about the importance of ideas in causing and shaping international relations. It's not all about power and the quest for power and the desire to power. And it's not just about military threats, but also the power of ideas, creating a European Union. So, do you strongly agree, neutral, cannot decide, disagree, strongly disagree? So let me go to the, let me do the stop share and go back to the cyber campus. And so what did I do with cyber campus? Cyber campus. So let me go to cyber campus here. There you see cyber campus vote. And so we go here, just a second. And so here, let me again share the screen, go here, close that, and go share screen and go here, and then have you vote. Do you strongly agree, neutral, cannot decide, disagree, strongly disagree? So vote. We got neutral, cannot decide. Come on, vote. Take a position. So again, just to show you, right, in the notes, there was some discussion about that. So let me go back to the notes here. So we go to notes. Where's the notes? The notes. Is that the notes? So I get lost with my notes here. So if you look at constructivists, I got to find the okay, no, that's not it. Okay, yeah, here it is. So if you do a search on constructivists here, so constructivists, they're focusing on the role of the Council is of the European Union. Constructivists would claim that the institutionalization of the Council of the European Union has created a collective identity that goes beyond the national identities of the ministers. That somehow the fact that the member states got used to working together closely in the Council of the European Union, right? Including the community method, the ordinary legislative procedure, that really set the basis for economic and monetary union, because that's only going to work. Economic and monetary union is only going to work if the member states of the European Union, in the form of their governments, agree that they need to compromise and they have to understand that they all share a common economic fate or fortune, that they need to help each other, including the Greeks, because again, it's not easy to do, right? Because there's going to be Germans who are saying, how can we give money and loans to those lazy, corrupt Greeks? We're going to give German taxpayer money in the form of loans to those lazy Greeks who retire when they're 55 and they don't even pay their taxes because they make a national sport of avoiding paying their taxes and by hiding their money, their income. And oh my God, how can we do this? You know, and they have to deal with that in Germany and in France and in all the countries. But constructivists claim that this socialization of the European member states in this process of cooperation and cooperating and, you know, making compromises and, you know, understanding that if I compromise today, you owe me. my neighbor or my other members of the European Union that you need to compromise in my favor next time. You got it? We all accept that. We trust each other. We have to somehow have some degree of trust. That, I mean, that's the foundation of liberal intergovernmentalism, right? Is the constructivists who claim it's, you got to include this commitment among the top levels of the European elite to make this work. And the fact that, you know, I showed you that chart, right? Let me see if I can find it again, right? Checklist app, is it this? Right? Yeah, let's just stop share and show you the screen again that I showed you in the last class, right? That the European Union establishment elite, they do not advocate and demand change to make France great again, or Germany great again, or Italy great again, or Greece great again. They always talk about how we want to bring about change to create a European community and promote global universal values. That's the establishment. There are those Eurosceptics who do talk about Germany for Germans and Italy for Italians and France for French, right? But you know, this is what the constructivists emphasize, that there is this commitment among the European elite, and it's not as strong among the British elite, right? There's a big section of the British elite that doesn't think it needs to make those compromises in order to have dignity and prosperity for their people. They don't need to do what the other countries in Europe need to do because they have nothing to be ashamed of. British nationalism has delivered again and again. It won World War I, it won World War II. It doesn't need to sacrifice the pride of the great British Empire because they haven't had a bad experience with British nationalism the way the Germans did, or the way the Italians did, or also the French. So, I mean, that's what constructivists emphasize. I mean, all of these points are correct, but the constructivists emphasize it's this commitment among the German elite, the Italian elite, the French elite, and it's not as great among the British elite. I mean, there was a faction in the British Conservative Party, Margaret Thatcher's party, that was not happy, and they pushed and pushed and pushed for a referendum. And, you know, if you're going to have a referendum, they already had a referendum on whether or not to join the European community in the 1970s. They wanted another one. They're going to just keep pushing and pushing. And of course, if you ask the mass of the people, the mass of the population in Germany or in Britain or in Italy, they're more likely to be nationalistic. And they're more likely to vote yes on such nationalistic policies. So the European Union response, you notice that I don't think the European Union really has votes or referendums on anything. Like this Next Generation program, there wasn't a French referendum. There wasn't an Irish referendum on whether or not to approve the Next Generation program and the Next Generation debt. There wasn't. They don't do that anymore because that's dangerous. Because the people are nationalistic. The people are not closely informed. The mass of the population doesn't pay close attention generally. And they might vote yes or no on whether or not they like the government at the time in their country. Not on the issue itself. They just want to pass judgment on whether they like the prime minister or the president of that time in their country. Don't do that. So all these powers that have created since the European Stability Mechanism was adopted. I mean, even the European Stability Mechanism, there were no referendums in that. No, not like in the Constitution Treaty in 2004 that the French rejected. No more referendums. Despite all this new power that the European Union is getting, European Commission, European Central Bank, because, you know, there's just the sense that, you know, we are the government. The people entrusted us to do what's best. So no more referendums. No more votes of the people on these things. And you heard Nigel Farage say, you're a lot here in the European Parliament. You don't like democracy. Yeah, because the mass of the population is disengaged and they tend to be more nationalistic. Everywhere. In US, in Russia, you know, Putin is very, very popular in public opinion surveys in Russia today. Okay, so I've spent a lot of time talking. I wasn't going to do that, but you know, I just wanted to show you how this works, right? And so now we have this new crisis, which is, you know, I won't, you know, keep talking about it, but you know, the European Union will respond to this crisis as it's responded to all crises by building upon previous responses in institutions that emerged from those previous crises to develop them further. And I would bet that this debt management office and Eurobond sales is going to continue now to function maybe, oh, I don't know, building a European defense capability. But we'll see, we'll see. So let's go back to the, so stop sharing. Let me go back to the notes. And is this it? I'm looking for the notes. There are the notes. Okay, share. So let me find the notes. Yay, constructivists. So yeah. So you can see why, you know, joining economic and monetary union is really important. It's really important as a real significant stage. I mean, once you get into economic and monetary union as a country in the European Union, it's extremely difficult that you can ever leave again politically, in terms of nothing is impossible, right? But I mean, the point that was made about giving all this loans to Greece, it wasn't just giving loans to Greece. That 320 billion euros wasn't just to Greece. There were lots of German and French banks that bought those Greek sovereign debt bonds as investments by those German and French banks, because banks invest too. And they were buying these Greek debt bonds. So if Greeks defaulted, German and French banks would default. And that would cause other banks to default. And would cause a European and a global Great Depression. So it wasn't they were being just nice to Greece. The Germans were being nice to Germans, because if Greece defaulted, lots of German and French banks would default, because they would not get their money back from the Greek bonds that they bought. So that money that was loaned to Greece was then used to pay off investments by German and French banks, who otherwise would have lost that investment, and they would have been in danger of going bankrupt. So and this is on purpose, right? You want to make the economic interdependency so tight that even Marine Le Pen in France, she doesn't talk about leaving the economic and monetary union. That the far right national rally party under Marine Le Pen, even she now is saying she doesn't want France to leave economic and monetary union, partly because it would be so economically disruptive, it would cause a global Great Depression, including one in France. She says she just wants to focus on immigration and restricting and stopping immigration to France. So, and you know, and the constructivists would say, yeah, and it was the leadership of the European integration movement that made this happen. And the British elite was not committed to it. They never joined economic and monetary union. Tony Blair was the prime minister, and he became prime minister in 1997, and he wanted Britain to join economic and monetary union, but he didn't have enough support in Britain to make it happen. He wanted to have a referendum. He thought if they have a referendum, they're going to vote no, so he never had the referendum. He wanted Britain in, but he couldn't bring Britain in because he's not God. He can't do whatever he wants to do because he's prime minister of Britain, right? So experimentation and change is important. That's what we highlight here. Power sharing and consensus. We've highlighted that as well. So we got to go back and talk about the debate topic. So let me look at the debate topic again, and so we can do our debate here. And so we go to share screen, and we go to here, and we go here. Okay, so given what we've been talking about, constructivism, neo-functional spillover, liberal intergovernmentalism, crises, to CUK students, the analysis in Chapter 3 implies that the Council of the European Union will move to qualified majority voting to decide the European Union's common foreign security policy in response to the Russo-Ukrainian war. So I would like you first to vote on whether or not you think that is indeed the case. So we go here, and so if you voted on this, right? So hopefully you voted, and so here, vote on, so neutral cannot decide. So then we go here to the next one, and is, okay, so here, debate topic. Is this the debate topic? This is the debate topic. All right, so identified. So please vote on, according to your paragraphs, on whether or not you think that the crisis in Ukraine war with Russia will really push the European Union to the next step in becoming the United States of Europe by the European Union adopting qualified majority voting in deciding its common foreign security policy. So you wrote your paragraphs, right? So please vote on this topic. And so we have one pro. And please go ahead and vote on the basis of your paragraphs. And so it's UJ1, UG1.
Yes.
Oh, UG1, please make a pro statement.
The reason I write my statement with the pro is that I read an article and it said the Russian-Ukraine war exactly affects the European Union to rethink about their decision process. And before there was a process with that, before their decision-making process was by the consensus process, but they were affected by the war, so they want to change their process with the qualified majority voting system. So that's why I choose pro. And and now the Trump approval rating is higher than the Biden. So if the Trump became a president again, then EU really want to go the independent path, like because the EU before the Trump was in the term of the president in America, the relationship between EU and America was really bad. And when was that time the EU said they want to go to the independent path, like so I think in this region they might change and they want to move their decision-making process by the qualified majority voting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that highlights, right, what we were saying, right, that you have to imagine scenarios like Trump gets reelected. That would be, and that's what Emmanuel Macron has been arguing. We've got to do this, he's saying to the other members of the European Union, because we can't always rely on the United States. We can't rely on the United States to continue to provide leadership on this. We have to be prepared to deal with a possibility that, and this is a really dangerous time because Russia is becoming more and more nationalistic. Hundreds of thousands of people have died in Ukraine. This war may go on for years, and unintended consequences may develop. Unforeseen outcomes always happen in war, right? I mean, this is really bad. I mean, this is really bad. And he's arguing, it's not just me that's saying it really bad. I mean, I showed you John Mearsheimer. He's always talking, this is really bad. And it's really bleak. And we're going into a dark time. Because even if there's a ceasefire, it's going to be something like on the Korean Peninsula. It's going to be a hostile ceasefire. It's going to involve a Russia in the middle of Europe over Ukraine on one side and NATO and the United States and its allies on the other side. This is the future we face. Even if there's a ceasefire, the conflict's going to continue, and Russia's not going to. I mean, it's probably going to try to destabilize whatever's left. John Mearsheimer he keeps saying that he thinks Russia's going to take half of Ukraine's territory. They've only got like 24%, if that, right? I don't know, but he's saying they're going to take around 45% of Ukraine's territory. They want 8 districts, not 4, 8. They might not take Kyiv. They might try to take Kyiv. They might be like North Korea. They want Kyiv. I mean, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, after it screwed up in failing to predict the Russian failure in this opening of the stages of the invasion, now predicts that Putin will eventually try to take Kyiv. They predicted that 16 months ago, 15 months ago, 17 months ago, sorry. As far as I can understand, they think they might try to take Kyiv. They're going to get more and more nationalistic, more and more mobilized, and we're talking millions of casualties. If they're going to try to take Kyiv, millions of casualties, not hundreds of thousands, millions. So what is the European Union going to do? Just rely upon America. America's Washington. Washington is going to take care of everything. You really? Maybe it has to. I mean, I don't think in Warsaw today that Polish people really believe that Paris, not to mention Berlin, is going to protect them. It's Washington. NATO means Washington. But, you can just imagine all of the potential unexpected developments. And Emmanuel Macron, for various motivations and reasons, is saying, we've got to respond to this in terms of our military capability. Okay, so let's see if anybody else has voted. 2 pro. Who else has come up with a pro position? So, Andrada, please read your pro statement.
So, in my opinion, basically, the Council of the European Union will go back to qualified majority voting because in the past, for example, when they did not know how to conclude in a decision, then they ended up using this means of voting. So if we look back in 2014 at the parliament elections, when for the position of the Commission President, there were like 5 parties that were proposed, and there were 5 candidates basically that were proposed by different states, and they could not come to an agreement and vote which one would be the best. So the European Council approved of the strategy of qualified majority voting and chose to select the candidate with the most backing from the European Parliament. So yeah, I also think that this breach in Ukraine's territorial integrity by Russia is a very delicate topic, and a lot of states in the European Union cannot decide which side to take, if they should take action or if they should remain silent. So I also think that all the states should just resort to quality majority voting.
Again, it involves various dangerous crisis scenarios for this to happen, because right now, as I told you, I came across a news report, an anonymous European official said it's not going to happen. But that was a month ago. But if this crisis continues and escalates, and the United States is not seen as providing enough effective efforts to deal with it, maybe because Trump gets reelected, for example, or that the Europeans, they would be able to get, for example, the Hungarians and the other groups in Europe to somehow say, we have to do this. It's in our national interest to act as more effectively and convincingly and persuasively as a true European actor, European Union security actor. Because all they have really now are economic tools. And those are important, very, very important economic tools, right? But it's not enough. And they would have to face a crisis that would involve some kind of future situation where Trump is in office, this war in Ukraine is going on and on. The Russians really do escalate. The Russians really do crush and defeat the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are disintegrating. The Americans, maybe NATO gets involved in a war. Maybe U.S. and Polish forces and others move into Ukraine, and there's fighting with Russian soldiers, and the European Union has to do something to stop this thing, I mean, from escalating to a nuclear. And you can imagine lots of apocalyptic doomsday type scenarios that are not so implausible anymore, that would push the Europeans to say, we have got to establish our own convincing autonomy as a security actor in the eyes of Moscow, in the eyes of Beijing, in the eyes of Washington. Right? That they decide they have to do that for their own national survival, not to mention their national interest. And that might sound apocalyptic and science fiction type, but it's not really. Right? Because, Mearsheimer, he doesn't predict, he thinks this war is going to go on. It's not going to, Russia believes it's an existential issue that it cannot allow NATO to have Ukraine. And even if U.S. insists on taking Ukraine, they're not going to have most of it. And what's left is going to be a dysfunctional rump, he keeps saying rump state, which basically means the western part of Ukraine is not occupied, because the Russians don't want them anyway, because those are where the Ukrainian nationalists are located, concentrated in the western part of Ukraine. The part of Ukraine used to be part of Austria before World War I. That's the heartland of Ukrainian nationalism, right? But, that's 44 million people in that country. And Kiev, are they going to accept the loss of Kiev, the loss of Odessa? I mean, okay, so let's see who else has voted. Oh, we have neutral cannot decide. So that is Fatima. Why are you neutral? Why can't you decide, Fatima?
It's because I still have pro arguments, but also a con argument, so it depends. I can't hear anything.
Well, why does it depend? What do you mean it depends?
Okay, so for my pro statement, I was thinking when I went through the chapter that the fact that Ursula von der Leyen had support from only a small majority of the European members, but that still helped her become the first female president of the European Commission, which means that in order to accomplish specific goals inside the European Union fastly, sometimes more than a consensus is required. And in this case of also resolving war-related concerns, a qualified majority voting will be regarded fair and effective, because that's needed, a rapid decision is needed in those times. But on the other hand, I'm also thinking about the fact that things like foreign and security policy requires anonymous voting, and I also believe it should stay that way because it is a sensitive matter and it's also safer. In this case, it avoid like a clash between the members in case they don't have the same opinion. So that's why I have a neutral.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of issues about like how else would the institutions develop and change, right? Currently, the European Union does have a high representative for the common foreign security policy. And that high representative of the common foreign security policy of the European Union is Josep Borrell, who's an old former Spanish politician. And he has said Russia's becoming a fascist state. He's been declared unwelcome in Moscow. He can never come to Moscow. Josep Borrell, he said Russia's becoming a fascist state. If we were going to have the development of a true military capability, who would be in charge of it? Would it be, you know, like the US, you look for, again, US examples. The president is commander in chief of the military. So is Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, going to be in charge of it? Or is it going to be maybe the president of the European Council would be in charge of a European military voice? What would a European military even look like? I mean, would you have a European, I mean, you look for examples in history, like, you know, up until World War I, in 1914, there was not one single German army. The armies in Germany were still divided by the kingdoms that united to form Germany in 1871. So there's a Saxon army, a Bavarian army, a Prussian army. You know, so yeah, maybe it'll be like that. But they were still fighting for Germany in 1914, and then they became a single German army, right? So yeah, I mean, you look for historical cases for parallels because that's what politicians do, right? They look for lessons in history, although those historical lessons aren't the same as what we face in the present, you know, but you look for examples. So yeah, I don't even know what a European military capability would look like. I mean, what kind of institutions, what kind of decision-making? Would there be a joint chiefs of staff? Would it be like each of the top defense ministers would then advise the meet, and then you would have the top, I mean, there are some beginnings of such institutions. They do exist, and they will be built upon and developed if this happens, right? But, you know, we're running out of time here. And so we have to, and nobody else, we're still at 3, but anyway, that's the topic. And I'm sorry, you know, I talked a lot. I know, I just wanted to show you how, you know, the European Union has got some successes with the Greek case. I mean, that's yesterday's news. Greece has apparently recovered, a success from the first great crisis challenge to economic and monetary union. And then we have to analyze its foundations. And those foundations include the United States, the IMF. They want this to work. If the United States did not want the European Union to work, it probably wouldn't work. And that may apply to military and security affairs as well. So we'll start talking about policies next week. Okay. Again, I guess Monday's is another holiday. So I guess we'll have our Monday class online too. Okay. Any questions? If not, then that's it. And I will talk to you Monday. Bye.
Thank you.